I'm John Leonard. I'm a corporate lawyer in Denver, Colorado with Fairfield and Woods. We have posted on our website a series of informational videotapes on various aspects of the law and how it affects your personal life and business. If you're a business, what kind of entity you can choose. We have one on litigation. We have some on how to raise money for businesses. Today, we get to talk to one of my colleagues, Mark Smith, on intellectual property. We've already done a series of tapes on copyright and trademark and what intellectual property is. We're going to drill down and talk about artificial intelligence, AI, and what it is and what some of the risks might be. I mean, what is, when I hear or see things like Chat GPT, is that AI, and what is AI, and why are we talking about it today?
AI is not something that just came into being. AI has existed for years. We do it in everyday efforts such as emails with autofill or searches on the internet or document assembly programs. These are AI. What has come to the fore in just the last few months and year is what's called generative AI, which means that it generates an output as a response to a prompt that the user gives. And the power of this AI is so much greater than the AI that we have been using for these many years that it's an enormous sea change in what we are about.
And so AI has been in our computer systems for a number of years, but we're taking a significant leap here, is what I hear you saying.
It is a substantial leap in both its capability and in the power.
Well, is that something you plan for, or you just sit back and be a victim, or do we call you and help get planning? But tell me how that works.
The AI it's got its pluses and minuses. The pluses are that you have the likelihood of increased productivity, enormous improvement on what you can produce and how you can produce it. But the risks that are associated with it are both legal and business. And it's important that you proactively address and minimize those risks before they fall on you, because it is an evolving and very quick moving area of the law. So things are changing almost on a weekly basis.
Well, I think I get the benefits. You can ask a program to write a poem just like some famous poet. What are the risks?
Well, if you ask that Chat GPT to do a poem in the style of so-and-so, Bob Dylan music, and it generates something that looks real close to what a Bob Dylan lyric is, you may have infringed on Bob Dylan because yours is substantially similar, and thus under copyright law, it's an infringement. Further, by prompting with a specific name of or style, you are taking away the breadth, and you will receive in the output more directly what you are asking for. But that risk is that you will be, in fact, infringing.
What about original works of authorship? In other words, if I'm looking to create something, setting aside the infringement aspect you just brought up, could I then register? Would I have a copyright, and could I register it? Because if I ask an AI program to do something, is there really an original work of authorship? And if so, who's the author?
That's the question that has not yet been answered by the High Court of the United States. But the Copyright Office has issued guidelines on what is registrable at an AI output. And if it is purely just an AI output based on a prompt, and that's all the output is, there is no human authorship and thus no copyrightable protected interest. And there is no author in the view of the Copyright Office, and that's the law.
You're concerned about AI risks, and we just talked about if we're so specific with a prompt, we might create an infringing work. Are there other risks that you're concerned about?
Yes, there's some additional legal risks because your use of the AI, because of the way AI is trained, it's trained on an enormous body of work, and probably the entire content of the internet over the last couple of years, just an enormous amount of documentation. And the use of that documentation as the library or reference training for that AI is potentially infringing in its own way, even without the output being infringing. So there's a second layer of infringement potential risk. You also run the risk when you use AI that you damage other intellectual property, such as trade secrets. You lose the confidentiality if you don't have a special terms of use and a contract with that AI producer to create a confidential layer about your particular prompts and content. So you run the risk of losing trade secret rights. You run the risk of losing the patentability of your inventions if it becomes public by way of prompt or the output. And you also run the risk as an attorney of breaching attorney-client privilege. And you have the risk that your prompt gives away to the AI people the information of your representation of that client.
And so let's break down a couple of things that you just said. One of them is purely commercial risk. In other words, if you're out selling poems or music or other things based on ideas, using AI to come up with content that you're going to market and profit by is certainly, at least for me, I guess, the primary commercial risk that you're concerned about when businesses use AI to create something they're going to sell.
Well, the business risk is separate layer. And like in your circumstance, you create something with an AI program. That output, you may think is going to be owned by you and thus protected against anyone else's incursion and infringement over that. But as indicated, the Copyright Office is saying that an AI produced output is not a protectable piece of work. So the risk that you have if AI is somewhere in the mix of the creation of this particular product is that no one owns it. And certainly not you, if you've contracted with a contractor to do a software program and that contractor uses AI to produce the program, even though your contract with the contractor says he's transferring to you the entire ownership of that computer program, and you think, now I own it, therefore no one else can use it. That's not the case because he can't transfer what he doesn't have. He doesn't own the output if it's done by AI.
Because you can't give what you don't have.
That's exactly
And
right.
if somebody creates something with AI, and now I see your point. And so the business counseling that we would offer, or you would offer, is that when we're talking with folks that are in the creative process, whether it's programming software or coming up with any other content, You already know, because you listened to Colin Walker's tapes that I have up on our video on how to employ an independent contractor and how to write an employment agreement or what important provisions are. The provisions where we say, gosh, make sure all of the IP your contractors and employees create are transferred to the company. Mark has just come up with another wrinkle to that. I'll be looking at my forms as well. Is we want a representation of how they did it. Because if what they're importing isn't really theirs to begin with, they can't give it to you. So that's very informative.
And kind of another layer, especially in the software area, is if the AI, as part of its searching of its library, comes up with open source material, and that's somehow incorporated within the AI, you must comply with the license of that AI original open source material. You may not even know that that was open source, but if you do a scan and find that in fact your code is open source code, it may have tainted and inspected the entire program, and you may not be able to prevent it from being freely licensed.
Well, if you have a business and you're creating things, there ought to be a provision, and you ought to be thinking about artificial intelligence. Because as I just said to Mark, you can't sell what you don't own. If AI has picked up things that you don't own, you're not protected. So a careful investigation of what's in your contracts, is that issue covered? And really having a conversation and forwarding this, a link to this, so that you and maybe an independent contractor or an employee that you're working with understands what the problem is. You need to get some counseling. So
I think you need to be proactive and address with your employees or contractors, are they using AI? Because it must be addressed.
Sage advice we will all implement. Thanks for joining us today.
All right.
Mark.